Welcome to Lecture 3 of Origins of Art. As we'll see later in the course, the oldest known evidence of art behavior dates to tens of thousands of years ago. That means that art behavior emerged long before the development of agriculture and state societies, when all humans still made their living by hunting and gathering. Thus, to understand why this behavior emerged, we need to understand the role that it plays in hunter-gatherer societies. In this lecture, then, we're going to look at what hunter-gatherer life is like. Hunting and gathering is not just a lifestyle, it's an ecological niche. A species' ecological niche is not where it lives, it's how it makes a living. Hunting and gathering is the ecological niche that our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, is adapted to. It's known as the foraging niche. In anthropology, the terms foraging and hunting and gathering, and forager and hunter-gatherer mean the same thing, and will be used interchangeably in this course. The claim that humans are adapted to the foraging niche may appear to be contradicted by the fact that most humans no longer make a living by hunting and gathering. As we'll see in the next lecture, however, adaptation is a slow process. It takes time for adaptations to evolve in response to environmental change, and we haven't lived in our current conditions long enough for any significant evolutionary change to occur. To understand this, we need to take a quick look at human evolution. Our species' evolution began over 4 million years ago, when our earliest ancestors gradually left the forests and began venturing onto the savannas of East Africa. Our genus, Homo, appeared about 2.5 million years ago, with the emergence of Homo habilis. Archaic Homo sapiens appeared about 300,000 years ago, and our species, anatomically modern Homo sapiens, had evolved by about 150,000 years ago. To put this in perspective, agriculture didn't develop until approximately 10,000 years ago, and didn't become widespread until about 5,000 years ago, with the rise of the first state societies. Industrialization emerged even more recently, about 300 years ago. This is not enough time for significant changes in our species to evolve. In short, humans did not evolve in and are not adapted to a world with agriculture, state societies, telecommunication, motorized transport, labor-saving technology, or modern medicine. Humans are adapted to a foraging existence. To understand what ancient hunter-gatherer life was like, anthropologists look at the fossil record, the archaeological record, and modern foraging peoples. Modern foragers are hunter-gatherer cultures that survived into the 19th and 20th centuries and were documented by social scientists. In this class, we're going to look at art behavior in modern forager societies and use that to help us understand the art produced by ancestral humans. A word of caution, however. Modern foraging peoples are not living fossils or exact replicas of ancestral humans. The conditions of modern forager life differ in certain ways from those of our ancestors, and it's important to bear these differences in mind when we use modern foragers to generate hypotheses about ancestral foragers. Firstly, modern foragers tend to live in what are called marginal habitats, habitats in which it's difficult to make a living, such as tundra and deserts. Ancestral humans, in contrast, may have occupied some of the richest habitats on the planet. Thus, the habitats occupied by modern foragers might not be representative of those occupied by our ancestors. Secondly, modern foragers have access to technologies and products that ancestral foragers lacked, such as metal, firearms, agricultural products, and domesticated animals such as dogs and horses. However, despite these differences between ancestral and modern forager life, modern human foragers are the best approximation we have of what life was like for our ancestors. This is because modern foragers are similar to ancestral foragers in several important ways. Firstly, they depend largely on foraging for their subsistence, although they may acquire some of their food through trade with agricultural peoples. Secondly, they live in small natural fertility populations. This means that they don't have access to contraception, that children are nursed for 2 to 4 years, and that children tend to be born about 3 to 4 years apart. Finally, like our ancestors, modern foragers lack telecommunication, motorized transport, Western medicine, and modern labor-saving devices. Because an ecological niche is a species' way of making a living, it can be seen as an economy. And because group-living species like humans have to deal with other members of their species, an ecological niche can be seen as a social system. Accordingly, we'll look at each of these aspects of the foraging niche, beginning with its key economic features. Hunter-gatherer economy is characterized by the 6 main features listed in the slide. We'll look at each of these features in turn. Pay close attention to these features as I describe them, as we'll be referring to them throughout the course. The first characteristic of the foraging niche is the hunting and gathering of wild foods using complex resource extraction techniques. There are 2 parts to this characteristic. The first part is the hunting and trapping of wild animals and the collection of wild plants, eggs, insects, and shellfish. The second part is the use of complex resource extraction techniques. This refers to the extensive use of tools and strategies to bypass human anatomical limitations and gain access to resources that would otherwise be inaccessible. A good illustration of this is the Shuar forager you see in the top slide. Without a blowgun, the man wouldn't be able to hunt monkeys and birds in the forest canopy due to a variety of anatomical limitations. Humans are not agile climbers, they can't leap from branch to branch quickly, and a fall from the canopy would probably be lethal. A blowgun enables the man to bypass these limitations by hunting from the ground. Thus, by using a tool, the man gains access to food resources that would otherwise be inaccessible to him. The use of tools can also increase the chances of making a kill. For example, projectile weapons such as spears enable humans to attack from a greater distance, which reduces the chances of spooking the animal. Tools can also reduce the chances of the hunter being injured or killed by increasing the distance between him and his target, as with projectile weapons, or by eliminating the need for pursuit, as with traps. Some other examples of complex resource extraction techniques are the use of tracking to locate game, hunting in groups to increase the chances of making a kill, the use of digging implements to extract resources that are underground, the use of stone hammers to crack open nuts, bones, and shells, and the use of containers to transport resources for later use and for sharing. As you can see from the examples in the previous slide, the term complex resource extraction techniques refers to all tools, technologies, and strategies used by humans to acquire resources, from the most rudimentary implement to the most complicated plan. This is because, compared to the tactics used by other animals, even the simplest extraction techniques used by humans are complex. Take the digging stick. Mechanically, it's very simple, consisting of only one part, and it takes little or no effort to manufacture, requiring only a bit of sharpening at one end. However, some kinds of wood break easily and are not well suited for digging, so the use of this tool requires knowledge of what kinds of wood make the best digging sticks and where they can be found. Also, digging holes randomly is not likely to result in the extraction of many resources, so the effective use of a digging stick requires knowledge of where and when underground resources are available. For example, where an animal has made its burrow, what time of day it's likely to be in the burrow, and whether it is currently in the burrow. So far I've talked mainly about edible resources, but the term resources is not limited to food. Humans need many other resources besides food to make a living and reproduce. The most obvious of these is water, but humans also need raw materials for making fire, shelter, clothing, tools, and medicine. They need territory in which to hunt and gather resources and make their camp, and they need labor and other forms of assistance. As these examples indicate, to a greater degree than any other species, humans make their living by using tools and strategies. There are other animals that use tools, but they don't use the variety of tools that humans do, and their tools are much less complex. The resource extraction techniques used by humans are complex in a variety of ways. First, they require complex cognitive abilities, such as the ability to innovate. Unlike most other animals, we can invent solutions to new problems that we encounter. That is, we can analyze a problem and envision a solution and the steps necessary to implement that solution. They also require the ability to plan and think ahead. For example, if I want to bring berries back to camp, I need to take a basket or some sort of container with me to the berry patch. Another way in which the extraction techniques used by humans are complex is that they often have multiple interacting parts or require multiple steps. For example, a spear is a tool with multiple components, a shaft, a point, and glue and string for attaching the point. Also, making a spear involves several steps. First, you have to collect the raw materials for making each component, then you have to fabricate each component, and then you have to assemble those components. Finally, the extraction techniques used by humans are complex in that they require extensive knowledge. For example, to hunt effectively with a spear, you need to know how to make a spear, predict where animals will be, track animals, stalk animals, aim accurately, and butcher game. And of course, you need to know how to navigate so you don't get lost while you're out hunting. The second important feature of forager economy is the use of a home base or camp to which food is brought back. On a typical day, group members disperse in the morning and go out hunting or gathering, then return to camp later in the day with the food they've acquired. This is not to say that people don't eat while they're away from camp. If people get hungry while they're out gathering, they may snack on some of the nuts or berries or whatever it is they're collecting. The same is true for hunters. People might eat some of a large kill on site, usually the most perishable parts, or they might kill and eat a smaller animal, or they might snack on plant foods that they encounter as they're hunting. On any given day, some group members will remain in camp due to illness, injury, or age. For example, young children and the elderly don't have the strength and stamina it takes to forage far from camp and carry heavy loads. This brings us to the third key feature of forager economy, the sharing of food resources among family and band members. Large game is typically shared with the entire band. Small game and plant foods are typically shared within the nuclear or extended family. For example, a person would typically share food with their children and/or parents, their spouse, and possibly their in-laws and siblings. So not only do humans bring back food to a home base, but they share it with other humans. The fourth characteristic of forager economy is sexual division of labor. In forager societies, each sex specializes in acquiring food from a different level of the food chain. Men tend to hunt large game, while women tend to gather plant foods, insects, shellfish, and also take small game opportunistically. From a modern Western perspective, this may appear to be sexist. Why can't women hunt? Why can't men gather? At this point, it's useful to remember the naturalistic fallacy. The goal of science is to describe the way things are, how they work, and how they got that way, not to determine whether they're good or bad, or right or wrong. When we look at hunter-gatherer societies, we're faced with the inescapable fact that they exhibit sexual division of labor. From a scientific perspective, our job is to try to understand why this is. So what is the explanation? In a word, contraception, or rather, the lack of it. In forager societies, women are typically married by menarche, that is, the onset of menstrual cycling, and typically begin childbearing by age 18. Children are nursed on demand, typically 2 times an hour or more, and are usually nursed for 2 to 4 years, and are born about 3 to 4 years apart. Thus, forager women spend the bulk of their reproductive years either pregnant or nursing. And because children are breastfed on demand, the bulk of infant and toddler care tends to fall to women. Child care is incompatible with hunting large game, which is really dangerous and requires a lot of energy. It's important to note that sexual division of labor is not absolute. Men sometimes collect fruit, eggs, insects, and other gathered foods that they come across while they're out hunting. And in some forager societies, women engage in trapping, assist in communal hunts, and/or participate in fishing. Also, illness or injury may require that a man perform tasks that his wife normally performs, or vice versa. The fact remains, however, that sexual division of labor is much more pronounced in humans than in non-human primates, and the hunting of large game by women is rare. The only known exception to this rule is the ANTH. Some, but by no means all, ANTH women hunt deer and wild pig using a bow and arrow. At the heart of sexual division of labor is the fact that the tasks of daily forager life are too numerous and energetically demanding to be performed by one person, so they have to be divided up. What's striking about sexual division of labor in forager groups is that tasks are allotted in a way that maximizes each sex's ability to contribute to meeting the needs of the group. The fifth characteristic of forager economy is the association of a band with a geographical range, within which it forages and camps. Hunter-gatherer life tends to be nomadic, with people moving to another camp as resources around their present camp get used up. The frequency of these moves varies with the local ecology. If resources in the region are sparse, as in a desert, then people have to move more often. If resources are abundant, as in the Pacific Northwest, people can stay in a given location for a longer period of time. In fact, resources were so abundant in the Pacific Northwest that people lived in semi-permanent villages, hardly moving at all. The abundance of resources may vary over the course of the year. For example, in temperate climates, plant foods and game might be plentiful in the summer, but scarce in the winter. The distance between camps is usually a few miles, but it may be a few days' travel. Collectively, all the camps and regions that a group uses are called its home range. Lastly, forager economy is characterized by a lack of economic specialization. Individual group members may cultivate and be recognized for special skills, such as healing or canoe making, but no one makes a living by specializing in a craft or service. Everyone in the group makes a living by hunting and gathering. We're now going to shift our attention to hunter-gatherer social organization. As you'll see, there's a lot of overlap between forager economy and social organization, and the line between these aspects of the foraging niche is often blurred. Although in this class we're mostly focusing on what hunter-gatherer societies have in common, it's important to note that there's a fair amount of variety in the way forager societies are organized. For example, in some societies, descent is traced patrilineally, that is, through the father and paternal ancestors. And in some societies, it's traced matrilineally, that is, through the mother and maternal ancestors. In some groups, couples live with or near the groom's parents after marriage, which is called patrilocal residence, and in some groups the couple takes up residence with or near the bride's parents, which is called matrilocal residence. Despite these differences, however, there are a number of features that forager societies tend to have in common, and which are listed here. We'll look at each of these features in turn. Perhaps the most striking aspect of forager social life, from a Western industrial perspective, is the size of the groups that people live in. Hunter-gatherers tend to live in small groups called bands. The average band numbers about 30 individuals, although this can vary widely, from a nuclear family of approximately 5 individuals to a comparatively large group of 100 individuals or more. Most of the members have ties to the band through blood or marriage. This means that everybody knows everybody else, and everybody knows everybody else's business. There's very little privacy. Bands are characterized by several types of fission and fusion. This term refers to a group splitting up into smaller groups, then reuniting later. The most common type of fission-fusion is the daily foraging party. Every day, the band splits into smaller groups to go out hunting and gathering. Some people remain in camp, and the band reunites in camp at the end of the day to eat, socialize, and sleep. If this behavior sounds familiar to you, it should. It's simply the use of a home base put in social instead of economic terms. Another common type of fission-fusion is visiting. As we'll see later in the course, it's very common for individuals or nuclear families to make visits to their relatives or friends in other bands. These visits may last for weeks, months, or even years. Thus, when people visit another band, they effectively become part of that band for the duration of their stay. Another kind of visiting is when one or more bands join up temporarily, usually to trade, arrange marriages, or perform an important ritual. Because large groups tend to exhaust local resources very quickly, these gatherings do not tend to occur very often or last very long. Another feature of forager social life is the tribe. This term refers to a set of people who share a language and often intermarry. Tribe size varies widely, but averages between 500 to 2,000 individuals. As noted earlier, bands that are part of the same tribe interact periodically to trade, arrange marriages, hunt communally, exchange information, and/or perform important rituals. But it's extremely unlikely that an entire tribe will ever be assembled in one place at the same time. Another characteristic of forager social life is that population is low, both in numbers and in density. What this means is that the total number of individuals in a tribe is low compared to modern societies, and that there are very few people per square mile. Another important characteristic of forager social life is the fluidity of band membership. As noted earlier, people frequently visit family, in-laws, or friends in other bands, and these visits may last a few weeks, months, or even years. Finally, a fifth key feature of forager social life is that it tends to be egalitarian. In forager bands, there is no centralized authority or government. Every man is his own boss. This is not always the case for women. In some groups, women have a say in important decisions, while in others, they're subordinate to their husbands, fathers, and/or adult brothers. Children are subordinate to parents and have no say in important decisions. Although there are no official or hereditary leaders in forager bands, there is often a headman. This is typically a man who has a reputation for making effective decisions in times of crisis. Thus, his judgment is often deferred to when a group decision is being made. The headman leads by influence, not by force, and doesn't have the right to tell anybody else what to do. These last two features of forager social life are interrelated. Personal autonomy enables individuals or families to leave a band when a conflict breaks out or when they disagree with a group decision. In ANTH society, for example, no formal institutionalized authority base exists. The nuclear family is the decision maker concerning residence, work, and relations with other people. Older, respected individuals, often parents and grandparents of group members, may be consulted, but their opinions are not binding. Often group consensus is desired. People who disagree are free to grumble or to leave. This concludes Lecture 3. In the next lecture, we'll look at what it means to be adapted to an ecological niche.